Ladies and gentlemen, you know, as we look at this, we have to understand the word is liberty, isn't it? The word is action, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Baird.
Thanks everybody for being here today. Thank you for taking out from your Sunday to come and listen to what we have to say. I'm not here to tell the people of Shasta County how they should live. I'm here to ask you some questions. And depending upon the answers to those questions, I'm here to ask you something even more important. I want to ask you to do something about it. American politics is funny. It's very dependent upon the people to act when they find something wrong with their government. It's very dependent upon people to get off the couch and pay attention. Because liberty was a gift, right? You didn't pay for it. It was paid for with the lives, the treasure, and the sacred honor of your forefathers. And that's in the Declaration of Independence down near the last paragraph. Liberty was a gift to you, but it has a price. And the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. So if we wake up in the morning and we don't like what's going on, who can we blame? Can we blame that entity called the government? Can we blame someone who doesn't even know you exist? Can we blame the fact even that we don't have representation? No, because how did we get here? We got here by not paying attention. This is our own fault. All we have to do to find out who can change this is go look in the mirror. Every single one of us. And we can change this because we are the people mentioned in the Constitution of California and the Constitution of the United States. I mean, really, we'll ask ourselves, what is Constitution? Is our Constitution, is the Constitution of this state or the federal government the truth, or is it a lie? Is liberty the truth or a lie? Why should we care? Why do we care about Constitution? Why do we care about liberty? Why should we care? We care about the truth or the lie. Now, it has to be one or the other. It can't be something in the middle. Either those words printed on the Constitution of the state of California are the truth or they are not. And William Howard Taft, who was not only President of the United States, he was also a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He said that he can prove that the Constitution does not live because it is written in words, and you can look each word up in the dictionary. He also said when you want to interpret a document like the Constitution, you must go to the Old English because that was the language in which it was written. Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. And Noah wrote the dictionary because he wanted to end all association with the King's English. He changed the spellings of words like color, C-O-L-O-U-R, to C-O-L-O-R, so that he could make a point in the American psyche that we are Americans, we're no longer Englishmen. And we need to act as Americans, speak as Americans, spell as Americans, do things that Americans think are important. And he did that based upon a document that has certain things in it. And these things are very important to us. And when the court considers these things, because the Constitution really, the Constitution of the state of California is nothing more than a contract, isn't it? And so is the federal Constitution. It is a contract by we the people, and we use that contract through our state constitutional conventions to create a constitution. And the court calls this reasoning the meeting of the minds. They say when you want to know what a constitution, what a contract should mean, you go back to the earliest documents, the notes, the letters, the speeches that people made. Try to find out what the authors of that document meant when they said what they said. And that's very fortunate for us because we have all of that. We have their letters, their speeches, their documents, their letters to one another. We have their notes, we have their declarations, resolutions, ordinances. We have copies of the document itself. And that's another rule of evidence that the court considers. It's called the oldest evidence is the best evidence. So whenever you want to find out what a contract means, you go back to the original document itself. Now, Terry alluded to the fact that this isn't about political party. That's true. I don't care what the issues are. I don't care what your issue is. I don't even care what my issues are because it doesn't matter. I don't have representation to bring those issues forward. I'm not a member of a political party, that's true. I'm not even a member of a declined estate party. I don't even put that down. I vote my conscience every single time. I don't care who's running. I don't care what it is. I vote for the guy that will follow the Constitution the most carefully because that's what I'm interested in. And when it comes to When it comes to monetary programs, I try to vote for what's right every time. Now, I may be wrong about those things, but I'm voting my conscience. And I'm not dependent upon anyone to tell me what my conscience should say. So I want to get down to some of the questions that I want to ask you. First of all, what is liberty and why should we care? And liberty is a couple of thousand years old, really, maybe even older than that. But liberty are those laws that Marcus Cicero said were not written on paper. They were only written in the hearts of men. They weren't taught to us by anyone else. They were derived from nature itself. They're the things that we just inherently know are right or wrong for free individuals. Those are the things, in other words, your right to own something. When you work hard and you pay for something and you own that thing, the use of that thing should be yours and yours alone. It should not be up to anyone to come and take that thing from you so that you cannot use it. In other words, if you have the food police and they come to your house and they say, you don't deserve that many groceries, we need to have some of this because the state needs them for other people. And you would say, well, gosh, I paid for that stuff. Now, I may give you a can because I don't want to see anybody starve, but the food belongs to me. What right do you have to take it? What right? That's an important word, right. Not permission, right. And we have certain rights that John Locke called the natural rights, the inalienable rights. And those are life, liberty, and property. And as Samuel Adams added later, life, liberty, and property, and the means to defend those things the best we can. And Samuel was a pretty edgy guy. I'm sure his brother John was yanking on his shirt tail a lot, saying, Sam, just because you think something doesn't mean you have to say it. But he did anyway, and he was right to do that because this was a crucial time in our history. So when we look at the California Constitution and we go back to the meeting of the minds, and we're going to assume that the Constitution is the truth. It is the contract between the people and government. In fact, that contract formed the government. Without that contract, the government wouldn't exist, would it? In other words, this was not a nation empty of anything but law, waiting for people to come to be governed, was it? This was a nation of people who formed government because they had a need to do so, and a legitimate need. Why did we form California? Why do we need a state government? Why do we need a state constitution? And this is very important, because we needed one voice to speak for the collective body of people called Californians when federal government came to California to do things we didn't want them to do, no matter what those things were. Otherwise, why do we need a state government? Why aren't we just citizens of the Western United States and whatever the federal government says, we do those things? Because we may not agree with some of those things, and we need an entity to bargain for us. We also need an entity to conduct trade with other states and to do things with other governments that we as individuals can't do. Government is legitimate, folks, but it's got to stick to the contract. So why do we have a state? Well, we'll go back to the meeting of the minds and to the original document. This is why. We, the people of the state of California, grateful to Almighty God for our freedom, that to secure it and perpetuate it, we establish this Constitution. So why do we have a state constitution in California? To secure our liberty and to make sure that the state government of the state of California will defend that liberty, to secure and perpetuate it, to secure liberty for our posterity. Let's look at the federal constitution. Why did we form the federal constitution? What's the meeting of the minds? Why is that important to us? And that's an easy one as well. We can go to the original documents, the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers, the Virginia Declarations, the Kentucky Resolutions, the Great Compromise, the Constitutional Notes, letters, speeches. Gosh, we've even been in their bedrooms. We know where they slept. We know exactly what our founding fathers thought. And we can define those words because they are words that can be looked up in the dictionary, and they only have one meaning. The Constitution is not a living document. It is a document cast in granite with a means to amend it legally should future generations choose to do that. One of the problems we want to correct with the state of Jefferson is that California's Constitution has been amended 521 times in 164 or so years. The federal Constitution has been amended 27 times in 230 some years, and a couple of those people thought better of and revoked the amendment. It is poor judgment to amend the Constitution to suit the cause of the day. The Constitution was not meant to protect us from changing times. It wasn't. It was meant to protect us from the good intentions of well-meaning tyrants. They mean well, but they mean to govern. They mean to be good masters, but they mean to be our masters. And that's why the document created by the people binds government, not people. When you read the Constitution of the United States of America, you see in it very easily that it was meant to create an entity which has very strict limits. And if that contract is honored, those limits remain in place. But when the people lack vigilance, government hasn't got a mind. Government isn't good, it isn't bad. It is simply power exercised. And when people are not vigilant about the power exercised by government, that power has a tendency to take what I would call mission creep. And it has a tendency to go a little further and a little further and a little further and a little further. And those may be areas that the people want it to go in, it may not. But the point is, the people have to be directly involved through representation to say whether they approve or not. Why did we form the federal Constitution? That one's easy. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. That's interesting. Let's look at jurisdiction here just for a second. When you read the Constitution, read it literally. Read it word for word and ask yourself, what is the meeting of the minds? What did these guys mean when they wrote that document? Why did the founders of the federal Constitution say, in order to form a more perfect union? Because we had a union already. We had the Articles of Confederation, and we had between 7 and 10 presidents of the United States prior to the establishment of the federal Constitution. That wasn't our first union. But the Articles of Confederation failed to serve the people who created that form of government. And so what did they do? They abolished it, and they formed a constitution in order to form a more perfect union. Article 1, Section 1 of the California Constitution says that we're born, and I'm paraphrasing, we're born free and independent beings, and we have certain inalienable rights. What are the inalienable rights? They're liberty. That's what liberty is, the inalienable rights, the natural rights, the rights that Cicero talked about, the rights that John Jay, Montesquieu, de Tocqueville, Jefferson, Franklin, Madison, all of those guys talked about. Life, liberty, and think about it. What is life? What is liberty? Well, life is your intellectual property, right? It's not only your being, but it's also your speech. It's your ability to worship, your ability to do what you want, go where you want, say what you want, provided you have the morality not to trump on the rights of your neighbor. That's very important. Jefferson is not exclusive, folks. It isn't. I don't care what people think. If Jefferson is not inclusive of everyone, it will not succeed. We have to include people. Jefferson is inclusion because everyone will have representation. That's the whole point. Jefferson is not issue-driven. It's not agenda-driven. It can't be, or it will fail. This is about representation for this county. And what you do with your representation is your business. And you will have one state senator, and as in the federal model of government, at least even the smallest county, as the same as the smallest state, will have at least one assembly person. The smallest state in the Union is entitled to one representative in the House of Representatives, contrary to Reynolds versus Sims. Earl Warren said, well, you know, one vote for one man. So if that's true, if the United States Constitution defends the principle that the smallest state will have at least one representative no matter how much population they have, and at least 2 senators, why isn't that okay for the states? Why would that be constitutional for the federal government but not constitutional for the states? Because the Supreme Court gave itself the power to alter the Constitution without the benefit of the people or the legislature. That's why. And the dissenting justice rightly said, and I'm referring to a basket of cases that started with Baker versus Carr, and then it went Gray versus Sanders, and then Reynolds versus Sims. But in one of those cases, the dissenting justice said, first of all, the court has no jurisdiction in the thorny thicket of state politics. And when you look at Article 3 of the Constitution, and once again, this is an easy document to read. I mean, it takes you 20 minutes even if you're a slow reader. Article 3 gives the courts of the United States all power over equity and law under the Constitution. Not over it, not the power to alter the contract which created it. Madison and Jefferson decried that ability. They said the court cannot alter the contract which created it, because to admit that it can do so is to admit that the servant is greater than the master. I've said this before in these meetings. My wife and I built our own house. We did it with our own two hands. We created that building. Is there anything stopping me from taking a bulldozer and knocking that down and building a chicken coop there? No. Because I created the building. The building itself will never be more important than the people who created it. So why now is the government we created through Constitution greater than the people who created it? The answer is it's not, and it doesn't have to remain so unless we allow it to. So when we get down to the Constitution, Article 2, Section 1 of the California Constitution says all just power is derived from the people. And I'm paraphrasing again, and if the government fails to serve the people, they have the right to alter or abolish it. In other words, they have the right to form a more perfect union. I have had local governmental officials say, I can't go with you on this because I swore an oath to uphold the California Constitution. I go, great, because you are. Article 2, Section 1. When the government fails to serve the people from whom all just power is derived, then the people have the right to abolish or alter that form of government and form a more perfect union. That's what we propose, nothing more than that. I am not anti-government, never was, never will be. I'm not anti-law, never was, never will be. I propose that the law serve the people according to the documents the people created and therefore created government. What we propose to do is an Article 4, Section 3 state split. It's been done before, 4 times in our history. Maine from Massachusetts in 1820, Vermont from New York in 1791, West Virginia from Virginia in 1863, and Kentucky from Virginia in 1792. This has been done before. It's in the United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 3. The founders must have foreseen the need because they put it in there. These guys were not stupid men. They were geniuses collectively. I think it was John Kennedy is one of my favorite things. He had a state dinner one time and he had several very notable experts attending and statesmen. And he said, you know, this is the most intelligence I've ever seen gathered in one room, except the day that Thomas Jefferson dined alone here. So what we propose to do is an Article 4, Section 3 state split. It has been done before. It's legal, it's moral, it's ethical. There's historical precedent for it. There's a procedure for it. Article 4, Section 3 says, and I'm paraphrasing again, nor shall a state be formed from the territory of an existing state or two adjoining states unless the state legislature agrees and Congress agrees. We need a simple, that's all it says, that's it. That's the extent of the clause in the United States Constitution that allows us to form a government that represents us. What we need is 51% majority in the state house in California, and we need 51% in the federal legislature. Article 4 does not mention the governor and it does not mention the president. Our legal opinion is that we don't need a signature from either one of those men. And we can form our own state. Now, what Article 4, Section 3 outlines is a process. When it has been done, the 4 times that I speak about, after those legislations pass, committees of separation are formed. One is appointed by Congress to deal with federal issues. One is appointed or elected by the state, California, and the new state, Jefferson. And we have legislation that we're writing right now. And let's say, for example, our committee of separation would consist of at least 2 people elected from each county, at least 1 person elected by each board of supervisors, no matter who they are, and the 10 largest cities in Jefferson would have at least 1 additional delegate in order to reflect properly their population. That committee of separation would meet with California, and California would appoint theirs however they want to. And at that point, the million mundane things would be done. Who owns the Caltrans bulldozer parked in Reading, and the apportionment of the debt. And we did benefit from the 6 States Initiative because we got a lot of free research. The Legislative Analyst's Office did a tremendous amount of research on the 6-state split, and what the State's Attorney General for the state of California opined was that when we split, all of the assets formerly belonging to the state of California, which now fall within the territory of the state of Jefferson, belong to us. Because remember, we were Californians and we paid taxes when those things were built too. And it would be pretty ridiculous for California to come up and rake the leaves in a park that's 9 hours away from Sacramento and then go back home again when it's over. That just doesn't make sense. So we would own those assets. For example, the state's attorney general also opines that according to the one man, one vote principle, because that's the situation we live under right now, that we would be responsible for about 3% of California's debt. And Steve did the financial analysis, and by the way, it is a great document and has been reviewed by 7 county administrative officers so far. Steve's model shows that our portion of the debt that California admits to would be about $560 million a year for the next 40 years, and that's also dependent upon the Committee of Separation, which, by the way, after we pay that debt, we still have a surplus in Jefferson. We have the money to be a state right now. We don't need anyone else's money. The state of Jefferson is profitable. And of course, we have to make some assumptions because we don't know how many counties we have. But the way California does its arithmetic is pretty fuzzy. And once again, this model has been reviewed by county administrative officers, and they agree that the figures are true and correct. So we would have the money to make it as a new state. And once again, that would be the bottom for us, right? Economically, we've been impoverished by the policies of the state of California. And once we begin our new state with proper representation, a smaller government, a less expensive government, the only direction we could go from there is up. So our opinion from the state, we propose a constitution that's cast in concrete, a constitution that protects the rights of the individual, that protects your right to property, that protects your right to do business once you have that business established. We propose that constitution so that people can depend upon what they make every day, and they can depend upon that to feed their families and to provide jobs for the future. I get calls every day from businesses that say, if you get this done, I'm moving there. California lost 65,000 jobs last year, and some of them were pretty big companies. I think if we created an environment in the state of Jefferson where business was welcome and not taxed out of existence, we would attract business and we would attract income and attract jobs. And I don't know how many people out here have your children left the area because there's no opportunity for them here. Well, there's a lot of hands up. How many of them are probably never coming back unless something changes? There's still a lot of hands up. So that's what we want to create. We want to create an environment where people are secure in their industries and secure in their jobs, and where the taxes they make are used for the benefit of the people and not the benefit of something far, far, far away which you don't want and won't use and can't be responsible for, or shouldn't be responsible for. The state of Jefferson, we decided that the method to create the state would be by declaration. Now, this is something that we invented. The declaration is not something that is in Article 4. We came up with a declaration because we thought it would be the easiest and cheapest way for the people to move this forward. We have no sponsors, not political, not industrial. We're not sponsored by anyone. We pay for our own gas to go to these meetings. We pay for the room, usually off the bucket that we pass. That only goes to pay for the room. None of the committee members take any of that money, or nor would we accept any. It is very important to me that you understand this is a movement of the people, period. People donate out of the goodness of their heart for advertising. That's what it's used for. None of us gets paid. None of us will take any money. None of us would accept any money if it was offered. This has to be a movement of the people. We have to demonstrate to government that the people are acting here and no one else. We decided upon the declaration because the declaration doesn't really mean anything. We created a declaration and petition to withdraw from the state of California because of lack of representation. And you saw the commercial, the North State has 6, LA has 35, the South State has 114. We don't have representation here. You are irrelevant in state politics. If you want something in this county, it's irrelevant. I had a conversation with a lady and she asked me, I want to ask you one question. How do you feel about single-use plastic bags? It was an honest question, and I thought for a while, and I answered back. I said, well, it doesn't matter what I think, because my representative couldn't do anything about that if he wanted to in the worst way possible. She said, well, what do you think about a couple other issues? And I forget what they were. I said, well, I'm going to answer you in the same way. It doesn't matter what I think, because I don't have the representation to address those issues, even if I wanted to worse than anything in the world. So we take these declarations to restore representation, and we have been going to county governments. The reason we chose county governments, that would be a way that would be the most expeditious manner to indicate any given county's support for increases in representation. And if a county government directly affirms the declaration, they've done a couple of things. First of all, they have not created a state. The declaration doesn't create a state. It's not in the Constitution. It's not for that purpose. What they have done is made a declaration to the state of California, I declare, that we're not represented. And in the second part of that, we petition for an increase or a redress of that grievance. And if you look at the First Amendment to the Constitution, what do we have the right to do? Peaceably assemble and redress the government for our grievances, right? So there's precedent in that as well. And once we have enough declarations from enough counties, then we go to the state, and we've been recording these things. We record them with the Secretary of State, and that is our official announcement that the last two was Sutter County, the last three were Sutter County, Tehama County, and Glenn County. We declare to the Secretary of State we have no representation. Then we go across the street to the legislative building, the Capitol building, and we give a copy of that to the Senate Pro Tem and the Speaker of the Assembly of the State of California. And in that portion, we are petitioning for a redress of that grievance through the creation of a new state, which will have a state senator for each county and at least one assembly person for each county. Now, if the Assembly ignores us, or if they fail to give our agenda, our declarations, an honest hearing, then they have created what the court calls harm. In other words, we have asked a question. We've declared something. We've asked for something. If they ignore our request as a legitimate part of this state, the people of this state, you know, we the people, grateful to Almighty God, we're the ones that created the contract. If they ignore our request, then they have created what's called harm. Those are the three legs in a federal lawsuit. There has to be one more thing present, though. There has to be a remedy for the harm. For example, if you bought an ice cream cone and you walked out the door and the door hit you in the back and you dropped the ice cream cone, there was harm there. The store was at fault because they didn't have a slow down deal on the door, and you dropped your ice cream cone. If you walked in and you said, I dropped my ice cream cone, it was your fault and I want another one, and they said, you're absolutely right and I'd love to give you one, but we're all out of ice cream and we're never going to have any more. Well, the court would probably dismiss the suit because there's no remedy for your harm. But this is an easy one. What's the remedy for lack of representation? More representation. So at the very least, and we're not here to overturn Reynolds versus Sims. That's not our objective. I don't know if that could even be done. We are here to demonstrate that Earl Warren chose the wrong remedy. What the Warren Court did was, in order to fix representation, supposedly because of the 14th Amendment, Section 1, which, by the way, doesn't talk about voting at all, he said that state elections will all be conducted by apportionment schemes supervised by who? Oh, I know, the court. That's pretty convenient. And you've seen the apportionment districts in the various states, California included. They're a block wide in some areas and 500 miles wide in other areas, and then they circle around to some little dot clear up here in the corner. My assembly person says it takes him 9 hours to drive across his district. But the lower two-thirds of California, they have 114 members in the same assembly that we have only 6. So what we're going to say in our court challenge, if we're ignored, is that the court chose the wrong remedy. What they should have done was expanded representation in California until each county had some. George Washington said 1 for 30,000 is democracy and 1 for 40,000 is tyranny. The federal Constitution says 1 for 30,000, but it's not that way anymore. So what we want to do is right that wrong. Now, if the state of California were forced to expand representation so that each county had some, let's say Siskiyou County that only has 40,000 people, and we had an assembly person, that makes it 1 for 40,000, right? That would be just about 1,000 state assembly people in the state of California. If we asked for the same representation in the Senate, that would be about 1,000 state senators, wouldn't it? That's obviously not going to happen. What's the second best way to restore representation to the rural counties? Split the state, make the California that is below governable in the legislative manner that it chooses, and give the state of Jefferson representation for each county. Now, if you remember what we said about Reynolds versus Sims, and you ask yourself, well, if votes can't represent areas, why do you think having a new state, you could have a state senator for each county when we're not allowed to do that now? That's because the court went on to ignore itself twice after the Reynolds case. The first one was in Brown versus Thompson in Wyoming, where the court said that Niobrara County, with 3,000 people, had lost their state representation in a redistricting, and they sued. And the court sided with Niobrara County because they said that every place deserves representation, even sparsely populated areas, provided it's not done prejudicially and it serves a greater state political purpose. Well, I'm here to tell you, I was a pilot for a military contract airline. I've been to 65 countries or more. I've flown in 6 wars for the United States government with people from 50 or 60 different countries. I have friends all over the world. It's not prejudicial on my part, and if it is, if that's what people think, I don't want any part of it. That's not why we're doing this. We're doing this because of representation, period. It's not agenda driven. This is about representation for everyone. So then the court went on to ignore itself again in Saylor versus Tulare Water, which was a Southern California case or Fresno County case where the Tulare Water District had a voting scheme of one man, one vote. And the larger ranchers were kind of angry because one guy would say, well, I've got 5,000 acres and I only get 1 vote, and these guys have 1 acre and they get 1 vote. And they cancel my vote out, even though I have a greater need or a greater interest in the water. And so the court also found that votes could represent rocks and trees, provided it was not done prejudicially and it served a greater state political purpose. And so Saylor prevailed in that case, and he was allowed more votes based on his acreage. And that's a very important case. So we have 2 instances where the Supreme Court ignored its own advice in Reynolds and allowed areas to have representation. Now the dissenting justice, I believe it was Frankenfurter, said, and it was either in Gray versus Sanders or Reynolds, he said that in doing this, one man, one vote, we're going to create a purely city point of view. And he was absolutely correct. When we look down the road 50 years, he was absolutely correct. And so the dissenting justice said that communities and areas deserve representation because they have diverse economic needs. For example, a desert community requires different legislation than a forested community. Right? An urban community has different problems than a rural community. And this has to be a win-win for California, everybody, or they're not going to vote to allow us to separate. How does Southern California win? They have the ability to concentrate all of their political power, all of their vast resources and money, in order to solve problems that we don't help them with. I don't know about you, but I don't even know what some of them are. Large infrastructure, earthquake problems, water problems, gang problems, crime problems, high-rise building problems. They have things that they address there that people in rural counties don't know about, don't care about, and don't have any empathy for. So they would be free to address those problems, while we would be free to address the problems that attack us the most or that concern us the most. We know we would win because we can create a much smaller, less expensive state government capable of taking care of our needs. And we can do that very easily because we could allow one state assembly person for every 30,000 people. We'd have 168 assembly people and at least one state senator for each county. That's 15 or 20 senators. That's very achievable, very inexpensive, and it is direct representation. You know, one of our problems in California is that a political campaign costs millions and millions of dollars. It just does. That's the way it is. When a state senator represents 1 million people, his campaign is not going to be cheap, and I don't care who he is. And I don't care what party he's in. When you have a state assembly person who represents 500,000 people, his campaign is not going to be cheap. You look at a state like New Hampshire, their political campaigns cost about $1,000. Every one of their state representatives represents 3,000 people. The guy pays his filing fee, fills his car with gas, and he goes and knocks on 3,000 doors. And if his neighbors don't like the job he's doing, it is very easy to replace him. And it's very cheap to replace him. Now, I don't think we could get to one for 3,000. That'd be a lot of representatives. But we could certainly get to George Washington's model. One for 30,000 is democracy. One for 40,000 is tyranny. We can certainly achieve that model, and we wouldn't have a very large government. It would be very responsive and very able to address the needs of the community, and those are the important needs. Now, as Terry said, Lake County was our first blue county. There are 3 Democrats on that board and 2 Republicans. And guess what the pitch was to them? It's the same as this one. It doesn't matter what your needs are. It doesn't matter what your issues are. That part doesn't matter to the state committee. It matters that you have the representation to address those issues no matter what those issues are. And different communities have different needs. For example, in Sutter County, they said that California was the worst business partner you can imagine. It took them 4.5 years to get a permit to clean a boat ramp. It cost more to get the permit than it did to clean the ramp. In Lake County, they have different issues. They have weeds in the lake, they have issues with drugs and things like that. But they need direct representation because their voice is not being heard for the people of Lake County. Siskiyou County is the same thing, Lassen County, Modoc County, we're all the same up here because we don't have direct representation. So that's what this is about. Now, if we're successful and we get enough declarations to create a viable state, we're recording these. Once we hit the magic number, 12, 15, 20, something like that, there is no minimum in Article 4. We go to the state and we have legislation introduced. And what we hope to do is find a Democratic co-sponsor and a Republican co-sponsor in the Assembly, and the same in the Senate. And then we begin the education process, because it is very important that we educate the people in Southern California what we need to do and why we need to do it to survive. That's what this is about, folks. It's about survival. Our communities are in decline. That's easy for anybody to see. Our children are leaving, our businesses are leaving. We're not making it here. And we need representation in order to correct that. So once we have that recorded, then we introduce legislation. If we're ignored, we prosecute the court case. That is a 3-pronged attack. First, it is governmental. If the counties involved who have affirmed declarations by governmental affirmation, that is one lack of representation for the county itself, which is a substructure of the state. We also have individuals who have signed declarations. I've signed one, and we have more. Every time we go record, we have a few people record these. That is me as a citizen declaring that I have no representation and I want remedy for that grievance. And then the third attack is, for example, in Shasta County. The government here, the Board of Supervisors, has chosen, for their own reasons, not to listen to a presentation. They don't even want to hear what it is we're trying to do. And they voted not only not to hear it, but in order to hear it, it would take a majority vote of the board just to hear it in the future. So they not only don't want to hear it now, but they've hamstrung any effort to have that item placed on the agenda. Well, once again, who created government? Not the Board of Supervisors, we the people. I answered questions for one of your supervisors for 5 hours in a Denny's one day. I answered every question he had. I was so sick of drinking coffee, I never want to look at it again. And the last question he asked me was, and he was so frustrated and angry, he said, what gives you the right? What gives you the right to sit here in front of me today and tell me that you want me to consider this? And I said, that's the easiest question you ask me all day. We the people. So here's the plan for Shasta County, and Wynn Carpenter is in charge of this. We have some packets, and I hopefully haven't lost mine that I was supposed to show you. We have some packets here that have support statements in them. Here it is. And they're very simple, and they have a self-addressed envelope on the back. And we want to recruit, what we plan to do is recruit several hundred signature gatherers. Now, you can do this among your friends, your family, your relatives, your coworkers, people at school, whomever you want. These are not petitions. You don't have to make sure that they have a driver's license or voted in the last election, because we're not asking the government to do anything governmental. We simply want each person to go out and get 100 signatures, tuck them in this envelope, and mail them. We're going to attract a couple of hundred signature gatherers, and on a weekend that Wynn Carpenter designates and his committee designates, we will all converge on Shasta County. We're trying to get other counties to contribute signature gatherers. We'd like to get 200 people to get at least 100 signatures each, and we already have thousands in Shasta County. We already have thousands. We're going to put this the 20,000 signatures we gain with the thousands of signatures we already have, and if we can get that number up to a number that equals more than half the people that voted in the last general election, we're going to staple those names to a declaration of and by the people of Shasta County and trot that down to Sacramento and record it. So Wynn has a sign-up sheet. If you would like to be a signature gatherer, please sign up with him. And if you think you can take one of these and just get your friends and family to sign and agree that they lack representation, that's all this is about, then mail this. That would be a huge help to us. And once again, the people have to be willing. This has to be a movement of the people. This can't be a movement by government for you. This has to be for you in order to change your government for the better. That's how it has to work. That's the plan for Shasta County. So in the end, we have a preamble to the Constitution, and once we get, by the way, to our legislation and it's passed, let's say in a perfect world our legislation passes, committees of separation are established. As soon as we have the first legislative event in the state of California, provided we pass, we'll form a constitutional convention, at which point delegates who represent both the people of Shasta County and the government of Shasta County, there'll be at least one delegate elected by the people and at least one delegate elected by the Board of Supervisors, because we want local governments to be represented in the state constitution process. We intend that no one will be left out. And once again, the 10 largest cities in Jefferson will get at least one additional delegate so that their voice, their population is represented as well. Once we have that, we'll form a state constitutional convention. We're writing a constitution now based on constitutions from other small rural states. That's just a framework to start with. You need a starting point. The Constitutional Committee will tear that apart and come up with a document we can all live with. And at that point, we will begin to govern the state of Jefferson. But we need a preamble. This is just a possibility. There are times in the history of men when political discourse leads to a separation of two people. We, the people of the state of Jefferson, do not make this separation out of enmity, for in the case of enmity, we hold none toward any man, woman, race, or creed. We make this separation in the name of representation, the last barrier standing between the people and tyranny. Tyranny, however well-intentioned, is nonetheless repugnant. Our safety, our security concern us not where liberty is at risk. Liberty gives urgent voice to our demand for representation. Representation which must reflect our needs, our history, our culture, and our moral imperative. It is these liberties the people of Jefferson hold most dear. It is our natural, inalienable rights which compel us to establish the state of Jefferson. We, the people, direct our representatives, now and forever, that the intent and meaning of this Constitution shall always be adjudicated to the protection of the lives, liberty, and property of and for the people of the state of Jefferson. With this state constitution, it is our humble prayer to Almighty God to secure liberty for our posterity. The time has come for 51.